At long last, we're going to witness rampant and willful destruction as we tear through all the juicy planer bits and break this baby down to her basic components. Not unlike a good church girl, I would later discover that the gearbox would resist giving it up until the bitter end. Nearly every set screw had been incorrectly torqued, and in many cases had galled the shafts, which in turn made removing the gears and collars quite challenging. One of the bearing caps had apparently cracked and been welded at some point in the past, which partially melted the lead babbitt. Fortunately, most of it was intact, and it doesn't appear to have been enough damage to cause the bearing to wobble. As you can see, my slotted screwdrivers rarely get used for their intended purpose. Several of the cutter head jib holes had the remains of insect nests in them. I took some care in removing the planer knives because although they showed some minor rusting, they were still pretty sharp and didn't appear to be nicked. I've already purchased a new set, but I may be able to send these old ones out for sharpening and keep a spare set. I completely gave up trying to get the gears off the ends of the shafts. It ended up being a lot easier to simply pull the entire gearbox and shafts out of the planer together as one unit. The outfeed roller would not budge. I didn't want to mushroom the end of the shaft, so I used a couple of bolts threaded into the end and beat the shaft out with a hammer. This old girl had been painted more times than a $5 prostitute. Many of the bolts and screw heads were softly rounded over with the buildup of paint. hindsight, I probably should have wire wheeled the two connection shafts. Tapping them out required a lot more force than I would have liked because they were covered in thick layers of paint. Like nearly every other component, the height adjustment gears and shafts were similarly difficult to get out. The worst of the pitting rust seemed to be in the bottom of the planer, so everything here required a lot of coaxing. There's some more blatant screwdriver abuse right there. After getting the cutter head out of the planer, it was pretty clear that the bearings would need to be replaced. One of them had a punctured seal, and the other had intact seals, but a gritty feeling when I rotated it. I was finally able to determine why one gear wouldn't budge. The set screw had apparently spun and gouged a ridge all the way around the shaft that had to be filed down. With all the parts removed, it was time for everything to take a nice long bath in household vinegar to remove all the rust and old paint. The parts ended up spending a week in the soup, but that will be covered next time.